Hi there, it's Ryan with New Moon Telescopes, and I'm going to start a video series on a step-by-step procedure to build a truss-style telescope, and specifically the procedures and the steps that I go through whenever I build a New Moon telescope. So I always start with a blank sheet of 5x5 Baltic birch plywood. This is 12 millimeter or ½ inch. And I like Baltic birch because there's no void in the plies. It's very, very stable whenever you cut it down into the smaller pieces. And I think it finishes very, very well too. It takes stains well, takes top coat exceedingly well. And so that's why I use Baltic birch. It can be a little pricey, but I do recommend buying Baltic birch if you're going to build a truss style telescope, if possible. It can be built from any type of wood, don't get me wrong. But whenever you go to the lumber yard to find the Baltic birch, I also recommend going through the stack and finding one with, you know, the nicest figure that you can find. A lot of times you can get lucky and you'll find some really nice curly figure through there. So you can find some with really nice grain and really nice figure if you look hard enough. Sometimes it takes going through 50 of them, but you might be able to find it. So, like I said, we're going to start a step-by-step procedure of building a truss-style telescope. I always start with the upper cage, and to do the upper cage, I've got to first transfer the drawing down onto the piece of wood. At this point in time, we have jigs for just about everything I'm going to build, but I'm actually going to do it as if I were doing this for the first time and not using a single one of my jigs. So I start with a compass, and to get the correct diameter of a 16-inch telescope, which is what I'm going to demonstrate building, oftentimes I'm going to use either a 17-inch or 18-inch diameter upper cage for the inside ring. So the inside diameter of the upper tube assembly is going to be either 17 or inches. It depends a lot on the customer, what size secondary they want, but just for argument's sake, today I'm going to make it 18 inches inside diameter. So the way we get that is we take a tape measure, we take a compass, and we're going to measure the radius. So the radius of 18, or the radius of an 18-inch diameter circle is obviously going to be 9 inches. So I want to make sure, yep, so I'm at 9 inches. So that's the first thing I'm going to draw, is my inside ring for the UTA. Now I want to be as efficient as I can whenever I go through my material. So what I like to do is go right to the edge of the wood. I like to leave about 1/8 of an inch, just in case, whenever I make my bandsaw cut. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to draw the first ring. Okay, now of course we need 2 rings to make a traditional style UTA. So I'm going to go over here. We've got to make room because we've also got to do the outer ring. So I'll make my second ring. Okay, so now I have my 2 inside rings. What we have to do is now make our outside ring. The little divot that I left in the middle here by the sharp pointy part of the compass is where I'm going to go back whenever I make this outside ring. Now I like to have my rings about 1.5 inches. Is how thick or how deep I like those rings, because that leaves me enough room to put a focuser board, to also put a finder board, plenty of room for the struts that are going to hold the 2 rings together. So I like to keep it about 1.5 inches. You could probably get away with 1.25 inches if you're really trying to make the ultimate lightweight telescope. You could go even thinner, but what happens is whenever I use a Forstner bit later on, I'll show you this, to make the indention for the struts, if you're not left with enough material on the inside and the outside, it can easily chip off, and whenever you're putting tension on that spider, ultimately you run a risk of actually breaking the wood. So I do like to leave a little bit of material there. So 1.5 inches I've always found to be really good. So there's 2 ways to do it. The way I'm going to demonstrate is I'm just going to take a tape and I'm going to measure 1.5 inches from the outside of the ring. The obvious other way would be add 3 inches total to your diameter and take the radius of that. But we're just going to say, all right, there's 1.5 inches right there. Okay. So I'm going to reset that compass. There we go. Tighten it back down. Now I'll make this ring. So there we have one. Make sure you can see your line, that's pretty important. Here we have two. Okay. So that concludes the drawing of our ring. Now remember, we still have that divot for the center of the UTA. That's going to demonstrate the current center of the UTA. And we're going to use that divot because I have to make a solid line going all the way across. So I'm going to demonstrate how I find the angles to put the struts, the focuser board, and the finder board on. So all right, we'll moving on. Now what we're going to do is we are going to mark the location of where we want our struts to be. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to use just a big square. Any type of straight edge really is going to work because we're going to go from the square, and next we're going to use just a simple plastic protractor. So we'll take this square or the straight edge, and you want to find that divot that you had left with your compass because that is the middle of those rings. And so I like to put my pencil in that divot and just point this, push that square right up to it. And now I'm just going to make a straight line all the way through those rings. So that's going to be location 1 and location 2 for struts. Do the same thing to the other side. Okay, now you could use your tape, or we're going to use the square, and I had said that those rings are 1.5 inches, so I like to find the dead center of those rings, and that's where I'm going to ultimately put each strut. So I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch from the outside of the ring. So that's done. Okay, so there's two ways that I could demonstrate how to find the angles for the other rings, and one way is pretty simple. You could just take your square, align it with one of those lines, and then the tip of the square right there is going to basically go right on that divot that you had left initially. Okay. The key is to make sure that it is exactly flush with the top of that line, so you're going down exactly 90 degrees. So I think we got it there. So I'll go down. And then I'm just going to extend that line on past the center. Make sure one way to do it is just put your square back down and gently run your pencil over your old mark and make sure you're not making a thicker line, and then you know you're going straight. So we'll go there. Now this gives us the location of all 4 struts. So I'll do this on the other ring. Okay, let's transfer the line across. Okay, now we just got to measure 3/4 of an inch on all of those. Okay, and that's it. Now we know where the location of each of our struts is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and take the camera. We'll come up close. So there's my rings. Okay, and what I was talking about earlier, I'll show you right now with the square. That's one way that you can actually go from your initial straight line, go down right in the middle where that point is at the divot. That is straight with and flush with that original straight line you made. Extend a line all the way down, and then you would go from that line, go like so, and you would extend that line all the way back up. And then after you have each of those marks that go through, go ahead and just measure your 3/4 of an inch or wherever you want it to be. I recommend the dead middle, but measure it, put a check there, and transfer all your marks. And next we're going to do the focus report.